Hello there, my name is Mark with your Church Online team, and thank you so much for stopping by this week's Menlo Midweek. Again, if you are new to this Menlo Midweek series, this is a place for us to continue the conversation from Sunday into our week. At Menlo, we don't want to be a church that just does church on Sundays, but we want to try to apply and learn and grow all throughout the week, so this is your stop for that. As we're continuing our series, We're Going There, there's a lot to talk about and a lot to unpack. So this week, we're looking back at our Transitional Pastor John Crosby's message. You can find that up here about politics. And his daughter, Katie, is actually working in politics now on the House Committee of Foreign Affairs. So we're going to jump into a conversation that they're having now. Let's do it.
You were a baby, literally, when we went to DC for the first time, and we were only there for a couple of years. But when I got there, what struck me was how much false piety there was. And at the same time, alongside that, and sometimes underneath that, what deep Christian faith some of these people in the military, at state, in the Congress had, that you got so skeptical about. And I told you the example of going to visit a senator who was in the hospital and being starstruck and really sort of ineffective, and then having another senator come in the room and having him teach me how to be a pastor, not by telling me, but by just showing me how you could talk to this person about their fears, how you could offer to pray with them, how you could serve them in a really natural way. That happened to be Senator Danford. And I was just like, okay, if I ever have to grow up, I want to be like that. Do you have any of those people that you have seen or met close up or from a distance that model what it's like for you?
Really, what tends to shine through is an attitude, is a respect for the person sitting across the aisle, sitting across the negotiating table, more so than any specific policy issue, of which there can be many that we very much disagree with.
Sure.
And I feel fortunate that, I've got a couple of of faithful colleagues who actually do sit across the table from me. I work for the majority, they work for the minority, and the character that they have, and hopefully that I try to reflect back, develops relationships of a shared understanding and a shared goal of wanting the best that really does help. It does not make everything perfect. There are still winners and losers in the adversarial system that we have in our political environment, but it lessens the blows, and it makes things more palatable.
Let me stop you there, because I think that's powerful, that there's a character level and a regard for other people level that goes alongside with the battle that's being fought. I think that's really important for people to know what's happening behind the scenes. On the flip side, what are some examples of pitfalls that you think that public people fall into when their faith says they should go this way and instead they go another way?
You have a lot of folks who come to DC who are extremely passionate and care deeply and have their faith, have their values, have their own personal interests inform what they do day in and day out. And that is great. Makes for really excellent dinner conversations. It does mean that same passion can really hurt things. I think, and so working through and being able to understand how do we prayerfully make distinctions between our personal belief and public policy making is not a matter of walling those two off or artificially separating them, and still leaves the very necessary and helpful task of how does my faith inform what I do? while understanding that an attack on a policy position is not an attack on me. May feel like that sometimes, may end up like that sometimes, but in an ideal world, and I think that it does take a lot of thought and prayer to be reminded of that.
That's great. I love that.
I will say one of the pitfalls is justifying trade-offs in the name of faith, of seeing public servants, of politicians, other thought leaders be confronted with a candidate, a vote, a bill, and that doesn't align with their beliefs, or at least their stated beliefs, or goes against the character of God, or what we seek to have reflected in our own lives. And it being justified in a sense of, well, he may be a jerk, but he's pro fill in the blank. Or, well, he may not like this, but I'll hold my nose and vote for him.
Gotcha.
And to me, at least, that's different between understanding that there's no perfect party, there's no perfect candidate, there's, a spectrum on the personal and the political side that helps us understand what we value and what we bring to the table. When it starts getting to those trade-offs, though, I think it's difficult to see people who profess faith and then ignore red lines or walk right over them or trade them in the name of political expediency.
That's so important. I love that answer. In part because it shows that we are both saint and sinner at the same time, and you got to figure that balance out. What's important about faith and public service that you think about?
I will say, at least for me, acknowledging that the last several years, especially the last year, has been unprecedented. I know we're all sick of using that term, and I would love to go back to president times, whatever that means. And particularly when it comes to our political discourse, I think on the one hand, that makes the stakes higher, and even to have these conversations and to follow through. But I also think it's really important to acknowledge the struggle and the depth of what we're talking about here, and that it's fantastic that we as believers are engaging on this from that perspective, but we are one in a sea, and this is something that hits communities, hits individuals, from Lake Street in Minneapolis to my friends who got tear gassed in front of the White House, to my office building that was attacked in January. And I think that is important to acknowledge that it's harder than ever and it's more important than ever. And it's something that should and needs to be an ongoing conversation and a journey that I would hope would lead to deeper engagement, that it's not a matter of checking a box or having a surface understanding or even just acknowledging it is the first step, but it's just that. It's the first step in having these conversations, and having a framework to help guide that is incredibly helpful. And that's the beginning. That's the first step of having those conversations and building the beloved community.